So that should, I think, let you all join with video. I'm going to turn off my video for the moment.
You keep saying the host has stopped it.
Let me see if we can fix that. We want you to be able to be on video.
That would be nice.
Would be.
The host has stopped it. I don't know if that helps.
Very, very strong dysphoria protection.
Well, yeah.
I mean, could you just click on us as participants and give us permission to turn on our video?
There we go.
Hey.
Oh, there it is.
All right.
There we are.
Exist.
All right. Everyone exists.
All right, let me get up here. Adjust the camo. Yeah.
Okay. I should read the intro then.
All right. Go ahead and take it away.
Hello and welcome to Rainbow Space Magic Con 5.0. This is the Trans Representation in Media and Fiction panel. Before our panelists introduce themselves, I want to go over a few logistics. You are welcome to use the chat to talk to each other and share recommendations in a respectful manner. If you would like to submit a question to the panel, please use the Q&A function or put a question mark before the question in chat so it's obvious for the tech person and panelists. There will be time for questions closer to the end of the panel, but feel free to write them as you think of them. After the panel, the conversation can continue on the Discord channel for this panel. So without further ado, let's get to our panel.
Well, I'm Alex Washoe. I write predominantly sapphic contemporary romance and romantic fantasy. And you can find my books on Amazon. That's the easiest way to find me. I'm also on Facebook.
Okay. My name is Kelly. I write under the name of K.L. Mitchell. I've been writing with Desert Palm Press for a few years now. I've got 3 books out, number 4 in pre-production and working on number 5. I mostly write, I guess you'd say, picaresque adventures, basically. I've always enjoyed books like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and things like that, and that has had a really huge influence on the sort of stories that I write. So, yeah.
I'm Heather O'Malley. I write contemporary sapphic fiction with trans characters and sapphic with trans characters fantasy adventures. I have a book coming out next year that should be fun.
Valerie, you want to go?
Okay. I'm Valerie Frankel. I am the author of 100 books that analyze, yeah, I know, Doctor Who, superheroes, She-Ra, Xena, whatever's hot this week that I want to write about. And one of the most recent ones is, in fact, the Trans Hero's Journey, for which I read, everything I could get hold of, so I have opinions.
And my name is Molly Cernik. I'm experimentally trying out Molly Topple. I have yet to really go into the actual name change, but that I feel like that sounds like a fun name. I am, as I've mentioned in chat, a developmental editor. I'm especially conversant in both disability and queer issues. I've exposed myself to a lot of queer media before my egg cracked, which was in December last year, and even more since. And my master's degree touched on genre studies. So yeah, I'm excited for this. Let's get started. So I think,
Okay,
yeah, go ahead.
since we've introduced ourselves, maybe we could go around and everyone could give a couple of examples of uh, what they see as good examples of representation, and maybe one or two examples of poor representation. Would someone like to start?
Well, I guess I'll go ahead and start. I'm not sure I can come up with two whole examples of positive representation. That's the hard part of the assignment. But I will mention one that has really stuck with me. I don't know if you would actually call it trans representation per se, but it was, I think, one of the first times I was really introduced in fiction to the idea of kind of gender fluidity and difference. And this was the Isaac Asimov book, The Gods Themselves. And basically, the story, at least partially, concerns an alien race in a different universe where the rules are different. And what they did was they had there were two phases. There were the mature and the immature versions, and the immature versions came in three genders. And what would happen was, and there was the stereotypically male version, the stereotypically female, and then a third, which was the parental. And they could not reproduce unless all three of them got together. And the interesting thing was that when all three came together, that's when you got the mature version. So that was a very interesting idea when I first came across it. I was really quite surprised. And it like I said, it stuck with me for a very long time. And as for the other kind, well, I came out at the very beginning of the 21st century, and had been exploring for some time before, and most of the media that I came across, and most of this was not genre fiction. It was just like we're talking about popular media here. Uh, Basically, we trans people were either murderers or being murdered, and there was better than 50-50 chance of that they were a sex worker. And that was the thing. Those were the narratives at the time. I could sit here and rattle off so many different examples, but that was, like I said, that was basically what they were pushing. And I actually tried to keep track of that and just try to make a little catalog of representation for a few months, but I gave up afterwards because it was just too depressing.
For me, I'm going to start with the negative one because it goes off of what you said, Kelly. Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, probably one of the most heinous films. Representation of trans people in it is, and so that comes easily to mind. But yeah, they're a murderer, so yeah, we're in that one. Yay. For positive representation, I have enjoyed the non-binary character in The Owl House, which is on Disney, which was really refreshing to see. And in books, I have liked I Will Fear No Evil by Robert Heinlein, where someone's brain gets transplanted into a woman's body and there's all sorts of stuff. Heinlein wasn't the most, I would say, trans-forward person, but it was kind of refreshing early on to read that. And also The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin. That one, the gender is a little bit more fluid and interesting, and yeah, that was an amazing book.
Alrighty. How about if I start with positive ones? Because for my book, we're in a boom right now, and there are some really nice things coming out. Charlie Jane Anders' Permanent Sleepover was a short comic in Marvel Pride, and it had more than one trans character. Apparently, that's a thing that people could do. A whole club of them. So we had a wide variety of powers, abilities, interests. It was just lovely and charming, and they're having fun. And Reka Aoki's Light from Uncommon Stars was just gorgeous, really, really gorgeous, and winning all kinds of awards and epic and beautiful, and, go out and get it. And I also posted not the only Goodreads list, but again, the Goodreads lists are filling up and you could add your own. Negative, yes, we've mentioned some of the really awful stuff standing out. I've also seen the trope of medical dramas. The biology is always what's causing the medical problem. I mean, it's always, or the superpowers are coming from, and we never have just normal people. Sure.
For my part, I spent some time preparing for this panel last night. I've got a whole list of positive representation or representation that I've enjoyed, either on the like personal level where this is an explicitly trans character, the sort of like closeted level where there's a little bit of trans coding. Very interesting example of that is the movie Society from the 1980s. Really, really interesting body horror movie. And then also there's the thematic level where it really speaks to trans concerns, trans themes, and I think one very interesting, again, movie. I've got a list of like movies, books, video games, music. Uh, One of the more interesting movies that has very trans themes but no trans representation is the recent Cronenberg movie Crimes of the Future. It speaks a lot to trans issues, a lot to coming out, a lot to the transition, but no trans characters, which I think is a different, I don't know, weird avenue of addressing trans place in society. I don't really want to give any air to strictly negative representation, but there are three things that I have written down for representation that I have misgivings about, which is Tokyo Godfathers, the graphic novel series Saga, and the novel Manhunt by Gretchen Felker Martin. I know Manhunt was very popular, but I couldn't finish it. It was a beatdown of a book. It was constructed to be as traumatizing to trans people as possible, and I didn't want that. Um, but I guess maybe to do a little bit more than gesture to my list, we've got Tell Me I'm Worthless, The Beatrix Gates, I Saw the TV Glow. Surprised that hasn't come up already. T Blockers, The City in the Middle of the Night, Dark Souls 2, uh, Summer Suns, Celeste, The Matrix, Cranberry Cove, We Know the Devil, Heaven Will Be Mine, The People's Joker, Questionable Content, Mediterranean Inferno, Pink Flamingos, Bloodborne, The Books of Queer Saints, Bound in Flesh, Society, anything by Maggie Killjoy, the singer Supernova, singer Lorraine, the experimental music artist Maddie Koenig, Lucas Charlie Rose, Orange is the New Black, Philosophy Tube, and then more recently Boys Weekend. There's my list. I know this is that went pretty fast, but this is recorded, so you can go back and replay it.
Molly, someone said, please share that list in the Discord.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely. And that's only a partial list. I mean, I can think of other things like an older movie and an older book, The Hotel New Hampshire. It was in the movie, John Lithgow played the trans character. And it was actually really well done for, the 70s.
Lithgow also played a trans character in an awful movie called Dressed to Kill, or they didn't call it a trans character, but it was the cross-dressing killer trope.
Yeah.
And then there was since we're what is with John Lithgow? That The World According to Garp.
Yeah.
Yeah, where he was a former football player who had transitioned,
Oh
which
yeah,
was not the greatest portrayal, but you know.
Yeah.
I'm really intimidated by Molly's list.
Right?
I listed a couple of things that mostly stand out for me just because I've been reading them lately. But there's a crime writer, Dharma Kelleher, who writes the Jinx Ballou series. She's a bounty hunter who is transgender and also a cosplayer. And I just think it's a really good series because it's a trans person whose trans identity is important, but is not the focus of the story. Like she's an action hero. And also Molly J. Bragg, who writes the Hearts of Heroes series, and a lot of other stories. She tends to write queer science fiction romance, which I think science fiction romance is a really hard balancing act, and she does it very well. So those are uh, some examples that stood out for me. And I came from I grew up in a time when there was no LGBTQ plus representation in the media at all. So I really, uh, I'm really sort of grateful for anything that we get these days. There seems to be so much of it.
If I may jump back in history a few thousand years, some of the first poetry in the Western canon was people like speaking the praises of the goddess Inanna and her ability to change to change a man into a woman and vice versa. So like,
Yeah, that's
um,
in Hudna.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So like if you want to experiment a little bit with where exactly you're looking, there is stuff to find. We have always been here.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe we could, that's sort of a transition. Maybe people could talk a little bit about their own approach to representation in creative work, if you have any principles or concerns that guide you uh, in crafting representation.
When I wrote my contemporary fiction book, Transitioning Home, it's about a trans vet who gets injured in Iraq, and they have all this free time. Like many people, that's when the egg breaks. Uh, and they realize they're trans, and it's about their journey, but also dealing with PTSD, dealing with being injured, and all these life changing things going on. And I was trying to be as authentic as possible, covering a lot of the psychological aspects. In my fantasy adventure book, The Hands of the Morai, which is basically about a trans paladin, uh, I one of the things I thought would be interesting in that world is if you have, people called lost sisters or lost brothers, stealing a thing from the turfs, and they're basically you're born in the wrong body. And there's a simple ritual that will fix it. And then you will get the body you should have had. It's a non issue kind of thing. Some people get a little weirded out about it, but they're the exception and not the rule. It's mostly, oh, okay, well, let's fix this. And I thought that would be a fun thing to do with society. And it did change a number of things.
I can go. So I have a developmental editor. I've got a very structural way of approaching the representation in the works that I edit. Is again not a writer, but um, there was an essay that I read several years ago, a decade ago, and was just thinking about it yesterday, but the actual essayist is escaping me. It was on Black representation in fiction. And this particular essayist broke it down into three categories of Black representation. The first using or in video games anyway. The first category was represented by the video game Remember Me, which includes an identity in the story, but does not address that identity's themes or its traumas in the story. The second, as represented by Assassin's Creed Black Flag, makes the identities, themes, and traumas the center of the story. And then the third category is including, it is represented by the video game The Walking Dead, which includes identities, themes, and traumas, but does not center them. It makes the story about something else. And that was a useful way of thinking about crafting representation. I think a different way to also attempt to systematize trans-specific representation is to choose which phases in a trans journey you want to represent. One being like the easiest one that came to mind was being an egg, cracking the egg, being in the closet, coming out, and then being out, as potential phases in this journey. I'm sure it's not the same for everybody. It's just based on me, but thinking about it like that, I think could be helpful for creating more focus in a story. And focus, love it, love a focus. And I have also got a few different themes that I think are very, very important to address in a trans story. But the one from which I believe most or all of them emerge from is the relationship between simplicity, profundity, and emergent complexity. Because I can say I'm a girl, and that is a very simple statement to make until you start to think about it. Because what does being a girl mean? What does that mean for me? How does it shape who I am? And also, what does it mean in larger society? Is like it's something that I can elaborate on for the rest of my life, and I'm going to, because that's what being trans means for me. Um, well, if everybody is interested, I can go into more themes later on, but I don't want to take up too much time. So, um, Kelly, Valerie?
Well, I've been doing nonfiction analysis, so different answer to the, different process. Co-author and I were having such fun, just politely throwing out each other's chapters of, could we please not use that one? Or that one, really, really, could you not, please? Which goes back to the, obviously sensitivity readers, plenty of sensitivity readers consider what they're saying. And for what I was doing, just doing a lot of searches of how did people regard this movie really helped to see which ones really were. I was about to say too problematic to include. It's iffy, but some of them were just over the line.
Okay. So I guess that's me. I honestly have not done a lot of trans representation in my books as yet. Uh, Although the one that's currently in pre-production does have a character that no, wait, I'm sorry, it's the one that I'm writing now that does have a character that is essentially an FTM and is based a little bit on some of the trans masculine people that I know, and basically letting that kind of, I'm trying to use what I know about these people and what I know about myself for that matter, and just that way try to make it a real flesh and blood character and as true as they could have been in the setting, which is around about the 16th century. So it's a little complicated to put it mildly. But yeah, just the thing is just, I mean, and I do this with all my characters, queer and otherwise, is just to always have in the back of your mind, is this honest? Is this real? Do you know? I mean, does this sound like somebody that you would expect to run into in the real world, you know? And just it's all part of the discipline of writing, really. So yeah, I mean, it just that's the main thing is to keep things real.
Thank you. I think personally, I write about half of my books have trans characters in them. The first book I ever published was actually a Western with a trans male main character. It's called Land of Iron. It's still available. I think because I write primarily romance and just because my personality works this way, I tend to focus on trans and queer happiness, joy, and I try not to turn away from, the challenges and the prejudice and everything that people have to face, but I don't want to make that the focus of my story. I want to write about the possibilities of trans and queer people being happy and finding love and community. And so I think all of those things factor strongly in the way that I represent characters and stories in my writing. Do we have any questions
There are two in the Q&A.
from the audience? How does the issue of straight response to trans issues affect the marketability of your creations? Do you try to keep that in mind? Worry about cis straight readers marketing wise? Anyone?
I don't really market to cis straight readers, not specifically. I mean, you know, I have my audience in mind, and it's not them. So
When I wrote Transitioning Home, I wrote it for a general audience, which included cis readers, and so it does a bit more explaining and goes into some of the psychology a bit more to let people kind of experience the process so they could more easily relate. But other things, yeah, I don't. I focus more on just writing the story, and if cis readers want to read it, that's great. But that's not necessarily something I'm tailoring most of my books for.
Yeah.
There seems to be a trans and non-binary boom in fiction right now, as in publishers are seeking it. So I wouldn't hold back. I took my book through my critique group, and they were just going glossary, please define that, define that, define that, define that. So my co-author and I blinked and put in a glossary. But aside from that, away we go.
I think there are two aspects to this question. The first is what kind of money do you want to put into the work and what kind of money do you expect to get out of it? If you think that there is a straight audience for your book, then um, absolutely market that way. But don't throw more marketing dollars into it than you expect to get out. Um, and like the cis straight response would, I think, be important to think about with regards to that. The second aspect of it is the activist potential of fiction, because people are not static. People change their minds. And I think that I saw the TV Glow, which I imagine most of the people on this panel, most of the people attending this panel have seen at this point, um, is a magnificent piece of activist fiction. Because if you read the ending of that as being a denial of hope for Isabel, denial of hope for the main character, then what that does is it creates an unfulfilled desire in the audience's mind and in their heart. And so it predisposes them to see a transition as a victory, as a happy thing. And writing to create that kind of audience response is something that all of us can do. And we're not all Jane Schoenbrunn, but we all of us have the potential to turn our readers into better people. So thinking of the cis straight response is important so that you can then control it.
I think for me, I spent a large part of my life having to translate cis straight stories into something that I could apply to myself, because those were the only stories that I had. And when I started seriously writing myself, I decided that I wanted to write the kind of stories that I wish I had had when I was young. And I do know that there are straight people, there are cis people who have read my books and liked them. I was kind of worried. Like I said, the first book I published was a Western, and the Western audience is pretty conservative. And I was kind of worried that I might get like review bombed or negative reviews. And it didn't happen. I think in part because my books sell mostly to the LGBTQ plus community. But I mean, as some other people said, if straight people and cis people read my books and like them, I'm happy about that, but that's not who I'm writing for. We have a question here that sort of follows up on that. Regarding cis straight readers, if you don't write specifically for them, do they ever react in a confused, disappointed way that they didn't understand something in your book? Do they ask specific questions to seek more info? And how do you respond to these individual readers who don't get it?
Part of the problem with that question is most of us don't get that kind of feedback from readers. I happen to have actually gotten some of that because members of my UU church read my book, sought me out personally, and asked questions. And they were just like, they want more information. So I gave them more information. I was happy to do it. But generally, the book goes out, you might get some questions in a review, but like most people in reviews, don't expect a response either. So, yeah, it's a very different, give and take with that kind of question.
I don't know any cis straight people. There's a couple of them at my workplace, but I don't really interact with them, so I can't answer this.
Yeah, like she just said just a moment ago. Yeah, I really don't get. Like I said, most of my audience is already LGBT, so I don't really get a lot of the stuff. Besides, I don't really get into the what you might call the nitty gritty of on. It's just I write stories where the leads happen to be queer. But anyway, here's some doom and excitement.
I actually have a couple of my regular beta readers from my critique group are cis and straight, and I've gotten pretty good reaction from them. I mean, obviously, being in, they're allies, and so they're people who are fairly well informed and predisposed to be friendly to me and my stories and things. But even though some of them have given me, really strong critiques of some of my early drafts, it usually hasn't focused on the trans queer content. So I've never gotten a review. I've never gotten a review that called one of my books out for queer content. I've gotten reviews that called me out for being too political, but that's about it. We have another question here. For those looking to find trans content to read or watch, are there good websites out there that might highlight these releases?
If there are, I don't know many of them. I do know that you can search for trans on Amazon and get a bunch of stuff. If you go to a number of queer publishers, you can enter information. My publisher, Bold Stroke Books, you can go to the website, type in trans, and you will get a whole collection of various stories from very different points of view, my stuff, number of other people's stuff, and I know other publishers can do that. Yeah, you may have to do a bit more work, but that's fine. I think Goodreads has a couple of lists that you can get onto, but yeah, that's about all I know.
I was impressed with the Goodreads list, and don't forget the GLAAD Awards, because every year they're collecting the best plus the runner-ups. I mean, you can get a huge list out of those.
Also, GCLS, the Golden Crown Literary Society, also has awards for trans fiction.
Most of the websites that I'm familiar with are more slanted toward sapphic fiction, but they all do also include, like, I Heart Sapphic and Jay's website, the author Jay, J-A-E. They're sapphic websites, but they do include trans fiction under that umbrella. So, anyone else?
I think Valerie, you posted a Goodreads list in the Discord already. Are there any more other resources that spring to mind? Put a couple into chat myself. There's for horror specifically, there's the Diversity in Horror Fiction blog, which it's been it looks like it is reasonably recently updated. Not really lots, but there is something going on there. There's also, in addition to the GLAAD Awards, there's also the Lambda Literary Awards. But a lot of the resources that I would recommend might actually be on the level of publishers rather than like reader responses. I think the Saga, or not Saga, Nightfire, Tor Nightfire is pretty good at this. There's also there are a couple of different places that are doing a lot of like queer novellas. They're not springing to mind terribly well, but maybe I will look around after the panel and see if I can toss any links into chat. I think we skipped over Mark's question in the Q&A on the how focused sensitivity readers ought to be.
Yes. I'm trying to write a fantasy with Sicilian fairies that has a gay male trans protagonist. Being a cis gay male, I feel it's important to rep minorities beyond one's own group, but for accuracy, I've been using sensitivity readers. What I find interesting and frustrating is the difference in perceptions based on how far in transition they are. If my character is post top and bottom surgery, how do you think views of trans readers less along in the process is relevant?
To get the psychology right, it's good to have people in different parts of transition because, again, trans people are not a monolith. We all have different experiences, and someone's point of view, even if they're early in transition, might be helpful in clarifying aspects of your character. So, be aware that it helps you with the psychology and the truth of the character, because sensitivity readers are very good for helping you navigate aspects of the character that you may not personally have experienced, and so you wouldn't know. And so, yeah, anywhere along the process, you'll be able to get different shadings of information, but I think that would be fun.
Anyone else want to address that?
I think there's a very obvious degree to which only somebody who's like currently going through those surgeries or has gone through them will be able to speak to them directly. But I think this panel alone should suggest that just back up what Heather has already said, that we are not a monolith. We are coming to this from very different perspectives, and that I would be very hesitant to group people by their stage in the transition. That feels a little weird to me. And it may be more helpful to consider to ask follow-up questions about why they have the reactions that they have to the representative written. Because if they're very sure, those are still probably thought through. Those kinds, even if they are gut reactions, they are gut reactions based on a breadth of experience, and elucidating why they are having the reaction that they are having might be more useful than the reaction itself.
Very quickly, we have one last question. What are you currently reading that you're geeking out about?
Yesterday, I finished Rules for Ghosting. It is delightful and charming about our character who not only sees ghosts, which is interfering with the very sweet romance in this. So this was much more death-oriented than I usually see in rom-coms. But it is a sweet rom-com, and also deals with this character being everybody's support system, and finally overflowing on that score. So, Rules for Ghosting, pick it up.
I recently finally got into Agatha Christie of all people. I just I never really considered myself a big mystery person except for Sherlock Holmes, but I thought I'd give her a whirl, and I was really impressed. I mean, the first one I read was The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, which I heard was particularly good. And I remember about halfway through the book thinking, oh, without spoiling anything, I was just like, okay, if she does X here, then that will be just so amazing. And then she did X, and I was like, okay, wow. So it was really, and she, yeah. If you've never read the books, I do recommend them. They're a little bit of their time, but on the other hand, she is a very good writer and very clever. So yeah, I'm enjoying them immensely.
I mentioned Molly J. Bragg. I've recently been reading all of her books. I started with Mail Order Bride, which is a science fiction romance, and just read through everything she's written. I've also been reading The Trans Hero's Journey, which was sent to us for this uh, panel, and I'm really enjoying it. There's a lot of good stuff and just a lot of stuff to add to your reading list. If people were asking about resources for things to read, and that's definitely one of them.
I just finished a book, and so my brain is a little bit on the pudding side. So I haven't been reading, but I have been playing Fallout London, which is a free mod for Fallout 4. And it's actually got an amazing story, some really cool stuff, immersive atmosphere, which is stuff I really enjoy in my games because it's easy to translate into books. Some of the last stuff I've read has been some Mercedes Lackey. She's really good.
Is that everyone?
No, I got some. So I mentioned earlier the Book of Queer Saints, or the Books of Queer Saints. There's 2 volumes. I just finished the first one. I'm starting in on the second one. If you're not familiar with it, they are anthologies of horror stories in response to persistent demands for sanitized queer characters who are already at the end of their growth arcs, who have nothing more to learn. They are already perfect people who make good decisions all the time. The Book of Queer Saints is not about that. It wants damaged queer characters. And so it is an anthology. The first one is, I believe, of specifically queer villains. The second one, I think, is broader damaged queer folk, and the kinds of I don't know, decisions that they make in their attempts to heal. I'm really enjoying that. Standout for me are, as ever, the works of Haley Piper, especially the works of Joe Koch. If you haven't read The Wingspan of Severed Hands, phenomenal. It is so surreal. I love it. I've been really, really looking around for things that are trippy and psychedelic to read because I need like some more surreality. I need to have something harder to chew on. Um, and Joe Koch has that in spades. Um, Transmasculine writer and very, very good at like describing something that isn't happening, but still letting you know what is happening. It's really, really impressive stuff. I recently read Cranberry Cove by Haley Piper, which is interesting to me structurally. It is uh, it has a trans lead character, but it does not use that trans lead character to talk about trans issues. Uses that trans lead character to talk about misogyny, not trans misogyny, just misogyny. And I thought that it was very, very well done.
Just quickly, we're almost out of time. Would the panelists like to remind people where they can find you and anything you want to promote?
I can be found on Facebook, Heather O'Malley. My books are available at Bold Stroke Books and Amazon and such. Yeah, that's about it.
efrankel.com, and I filled up the Discord. Happy to chat.
I'm on Facebook as KL Mitchell, and also I've got my books over at Desert Palm Press, same place as Molly J. Bragg, by the way, and and also just trying to just I've got a book that we're hoping to have out in the end of the year. I can't do a title reveal yet, but I'll just say if you ever watched an Indiana Jones movie and thought it needed more lesbians, I got you covered.
It did.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. So again, my name's Molly Cernik. You can find me online, specifically at my website, horroreditor.com. I have been putting the torch to all of my social media channels over the last several years, so you cannot find me anywhere else, just horroreditor.com. And then the thing that I would like to promote is that I'm going to be giving a webinar on using philosophy to craft foundations of fiction. That'll be through Editors Canada, and I did put a link to it already in the Shameless Self-Promotion channel.
Okay, and I'm Alex Washoe. I'm on Facebook as Alex Washoe. My books are on Amazon. I also have a readers group on Facebook, Alex Washoe's readers group. I think we are out of time. I think that's it. Thank you, everyone. This was wonderful.